Okay. Hi. Happy to be here. I'm Bernadette Christi, and I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina in a gorgeous 65-degree weather in my garden. So I want to talk a little bit about my book, which is called The Sparks of the Ruby Slippers. And it has been a very fun journey of writing this book. And I feel like it has really been a culmination of my whole life. Um, and at this stage, putting it all together and talking about the journey home through the Wizard of Oz, the wonderful Wizard of Oz, which everyone loves and everyone knows is, a fairy tale, but it's a beautiful myth of the inner journey. And going from wounded, going from the external into the internal journey of self-discovery. Um, and I'm a therapist, a psychotherapist, and I've been specializing in trauma pretty much my whole career. So part of the book, I talk a lot about the impact of and trauma and attachment. I would probably put those two together, but they are a little different. And how that impacts the self and the connection to the self. And so the book takes the reader through moving with the healing of the feminine and the healing of the masculine and into embodying the sacred feminine as the journey home. So Dorothy has to go through all of these different um, moments of reclaiming parts of herself that have been fragmented. And this is where I talk a little bit about trauma and cultural conditioning, and she has to reclaim them. She has to become aware. So the journey starts off with Dorothy, who there's she's longing, right? She's in Kansas. She's not that happy. She's singing somewhere over the rainbow, and then boom, she has an experience of this tornado where it takes her world and spins it around, and she lands in Oz. And so that's kind of like a beginning of the awakening, where something shifts your awareness, your consciousness, and makes you relook at your life. So, in the book, I talk about it. It could be grief, a major grief episode. It could be a divorce. It could be a spiritual experience. All these different ways that something shifts the consciousness. Sometimes really big, sometimes really subtle, but you're no longer in your world. And so Oz is uh, the new awareness. And so when she arrives in Oz, she's looking at the Munchkins and they're talking funny. And it's really kind of what it's like when you have an awakening and you are like, oh my God, what is this? World feels different. You have shifted. Your consciousness has changed. So that's the beginning. And then we go through the book and we reclaim all these aspects that have been lost or fragmented. And a big part of this is talking about the feminine, the masculine, and the sacred feminine. And so let me talk a little bit about that. So I really do think people don't really understand what that is in it. As I work with clients, I hear this a lot and I'll ask them, and often they don't know, they can't describe it. So let me just do that quickly. So the feminine is an aspect of consciousness. It's not assigned to a gender. So the feminine is it's relational, it's patient, it waits, it's receptive. It can be soft, but I think that is uh, how people tend to think of it, and they don't think about it as power, but it's actually incredibly strong because you have to wait, and being present is very difficult. So there's a lot of work that goes into reclaiming your feminine. And so the feminine is the part of us that is receptive and, like I said, very relational. And I think for centuries, as we all know, the feminine has been really shut down. And so shut down in men and in women. So, but I focus a lot on women in the book, but it's both. So if you have a shut down feminine, then you're going to be acting instead of feeling. and we need the feeling in order to get to the sacred feminine, which is about wisdom. So the wisdom that's inside, you have to be open and receptive to be able to hear it. And you have to be patient and wait to hear it. For instance, I wasn't sure when I started writing this book what this book was going to be about. So I listened and I waited until it revealed itself. And I'm still, as I'm continuing to write the book, I'm like, I'm not sure what's going to happen next. And I just wait. So, because I've done the work to around my feminine, and that was a long journey to even understand feelings in my body and how to wait. And I had a lot of wounds I had to heal myself. So I've walked the journey, I've walked the path. So this is a myth, but it's also from perspective of myself as having awakening and what I had to do. And if I had to do it, it's not that different for other people as well. So, and then I want to talk a little bit about the masculine too, because the masculine is not the patriarchy. That is not healthy masculine. And so I think sometimes, and this is something I see with a lot of my clients, when they start to feel a little power and they start to feel their connection to themselves, they puff up and they start acting like the patriarchy. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's not it, right? The masculine is I think of the masculine as capacity. And so the masculine is strength, and you have to develop capacity and strength. So I'll speak to it from a trauma lens. If you have a lot of trauma, you're you are in a potential state of collapse, because what happened to you was too much for your nervous system to handle. And so if you can handle this much and the trauma went like this, boom, there's a collapse because you can't hold it. So the masculine returning is like, we need to expand that capacity. And this is where I work with people around somatic experiencing is my area, and different types of somatic work from different somatic specialists. So we work on expanding that capacity so the container is big and can really hold the feminine. So you've got to have the ability, strong masculine as that container for that sacred feminine to come forward, because the container holds and the feminine reveals. And then from there you can walk. This is the path of sovereignty, right? Of really being able to stay with yourself. And the beauty is you get to find out who you are. Like we were all born ready and open, and this aspect, this spark, and I call them sparks, the name Sparks of the Ruby Slippers, because we are all divine sparks, and we're all so beautiful and unique in our own way. This makes me so teary because I work with so many in my own journey of feeling like not enough, or I need to look like this, or I need to be this. And it's like, no, just be who you are. And that is like a beautiful spark. And so the journey is the journey home to, as you unveil and heal and work with these adaptations that have kept you limited and not allowing that deeper spark to shine. We clear the path so that you can come home and be who you are, which is Dorothy's journey, right? No place like home. And she thinks it's outside, but it's always been inside. And I think we're taught that it's outside in our culture. If I just have this or a little more of that, and I look this way, then I'll be okay. And that is superficial, and that doesn't take you here. The journey home to um, being who you truly are is really that inner journey. And again, why I chose the wonderful Wizard of Oz. The imagery is beautiful. So that is a little bit about my book.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bernadette.
Yes.
I find that fascinating. The way you interpret it, I think it's a modern way of seeing the sacred feminine and sacred masculine. I wonder, what do you think about, you know, in general, but related to your book and the sacred feminine? What do you think about the classical hero's journey?
Yeah. Yeah, this is absolutely a hero's journey. It's another version of it. And
What's the difference with the feminine and masculine? Because what we see in Walt Disney, for example, are, I would say, mostly masculine, but maybe
yes.
not. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is, well, our heroine, is a little girl. She's this young girl and seemingly, um, what do I want to say? Open. She's very open. She wants change. And yeah, this is more of a feminine's hero journey home. And we don't have that. And we have Joseph Campbell's beautiful work.
Mm.
That was from a man's perspective. And this is more from a woman's perspective because it's different how we,
What are the differences?
um, well, I think, how do I answer that? What are the difference between the feminine journey home is, it's a softening, it's an opening, it's a receptivity, it is a allowing. It isn't a pushing or forcing or um we aren't, yeah, yeah,
Going inside, maybe more than conquering
correct.
Minotaur or
Yes, that's right.
or a
It
monster, a dragon.
yes. Well, and sometimes there is a little bit of them having to do that because there is, so we got the characters and the ones that I really focus on are of course the scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Lion and the Witch. But there's also, so if I just talk about those for a minute.
Mhm.
So, well, yeah, let me talk about the Witch because
Okay.
that relates to what
Who
you just said.
is the witch?
Yes, the witch is what we have to conquer, which is our shadow, right? The witch shows she's the shadow. She's a part of us that we're afraid of, the part of us that we don't want to acknowledge where the wounding tends to be. And if we're going to make our way home, as in the hero's journey, we're going to make our way home to ourselves. We have to um, be aware of it and we have to acknowledge it and we have to, I don't want to use the word conquer because it isn't about conquering it. And it kind of is in the movie when she throws water on the witch and then
Yes.
I'm melting.
Yeah, yeah.
um, but Young writes about the shadow as something we need to put in front of us so that we don't allow it to drive us unconsciously. So it's really what we have to do with the witch. So it's a little different than a conquering. It's not the warrior. But it takes a lot of courage, which is why we need to work with the lion energy and find our courage. And especially as women, finding our courage when we are taught so often to stay in the background or stay quiet, or, guys can do that, the boys can do that, but you really can't do that. So sometimes finding the courage, which again, we can link it to the masculine development, especially in childhood. We need the courage to face the things that are scary. And so the line does that beautifully. Yeah. So, so yeah, I would say that is a little bit of a descriptor. Yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah.
What about the feminine warrior like Tara or Durga, or those deities that are feminine in essence, but that
Yes.
are killing the ego like in a warlike situation? What are your thoughts on that?
On the warlike,
Well, the Tara, the warrior Tara, or Durga, who
yeah.
kills the enemies by cutting their head off.
Yes. Yes. Which is the ego, right? She's
Yeah.
cutting off the ego. So, you know, I think the power is the inside. Um, if the energy is coming from your inside, if the power is, if it's not a exaggerated bravado, I will slay the dragon, but it's a quiet knowing that you have the strength. That knowing is in there, and you're connecting to that, not to an external idea. So I
Mm,
think the goddesses show that their strength and their power because it's quiet. Often it's quiet. It's quiet, like I can handle this. Like I think of Mother Mary, this popped in my head,
yeah.
who's got her foot on the snake. She has no look of fear or she's just like, yeah, I got this. And I think that's when the masculine and the feminine are working together, you have that inner strength. You don't have to be bravado and big. And again, I see sometimes, and this is something that you have to experience. It's got to be through the felt sense to know what that feels like. Otherwise, you act it. And again, I see this a lot with a lot of my clients over the years. When they start to feel power, they will start acting. And I'm like, then you will have the spear and you will slay. And that's not it. It is a quiet, deep knowing that you can handle it, and then you can slay the dragon from that perspective.
Mm,
That's how I see it.
yeah. And what about wisdom or the Sophia aspect of the feminine sacred? Can you talk to me about it a little bit?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that wisdom that lives in all of us, right? It's the divine that lives inside, call it soul or self. Um, and how they work with the sacred feminine, that is the sacred feminine. And you need the feminine receptivity to access that. And so, if you have developed the ability to sit and be quiet and have presence and receive, and then the power to know how to act, I'm calling on the masculine now, to act, how to um, contain, that wisdom comes up from inside. And it's just a knowing. All of a sudden, it's just a knowing. And it's in everyone. We all have it. We all have all of these. And so the sacred feminine is calling on that wisdom. It's not the intellect. The intellect, of course, is needed. We need that, but it needs to be in service to the inner. It needs to be in service to the divine feminine,
Okay,
not
so
other way around.
Sophia would be more close to intuition or inner knowledge
Yes,
than logical analysis.
without a doubt.
Okay.
Yes.
And what about motherhood and the sacred feminine?
Well, I mean, think about what happens when you're pregnant. You
Yeah.
are waiting for that baby. You cannot force that baby.
Mm,
You have to let that baby take its time to develop. And so, um, I mean, that's the beginning of the beautiful example of the feminine and our ability to wait and to allow it to grow. And it's an example of how the feminine is. Um, and you're asking a little more about about motherhood in terms of like how does that?
Well, well, my question relates to sexuality because I always saw the shoes of Dorothy
Yes,
as being red,
yes,
therefore close to sexual maturity and or sexuality.
yes.
What do you think about that?
Um, yeah, the ruby slippers, and actually they were silver in the book, but
Oh, I didn't know that.
they were
Oh,
silver that was the feminine, but in the book and they're red, and I like the red.
yeah.
I mean, I think of the feminine with red, right? And it's also life force flowing. So yeah, I
Mm.
think the
Life
feminine
force. I like
life
that.
force.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So it is that power, that life force that are on our feet that we can walk with when we can embody it. And it was at the end that she finally realizes that she has the power all along and the life force flowing through her. And yeah, so I think the red is beautiful for women and through that, just that blood that circulates the life force energy. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I suppose you related to Kundalini.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's
Okay.
right. It's moving.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so any word for closing the discussion to make a synthesis for people who watch you today?
Um, I think that the feminine is rising in our on our planet.
Mm,
I think that's why things are shifting. I think it's time that the feminine take its place. And I think it's really, really, really important that we understand that as more and more women have power, thank God, this is good, that they understand what this is, and that they don't instead take on the old ways of power, but do their work to embody the feminine and understand patriarchy from healthy masculine so that we can lead in a balanced way. I mean, that is one of the most important aspects of me writing this book, um, that we can have a balanced world because the world needs the sacred feminine right now.
mm, yeah, thank you. And the fact that you are accompanying people to heal from traumas, um, where is the role of the sacred feminine in your practice?
Hmm. Helping them come back to it. Like when I'm working with somebody and we are working on a moment in time when their power was taken through some act of trauma, and that's usually what happens. That is what happens. And as we unwind and we work it, what I have seen time and time again is the self shows up at the end of it. There is a deep connection, not every time, but many times, where the trauma is, and I say unwind because it is like a vortex in the
Mhm.
body. And, anyways, yeah. And so the self shows up and they can connect to it. And then we work on, and it is such a beautiful witnessing, watching when people start to connect to themselves and they can say, this is me. And they feel it and they know it. And there's a deep settling in the nervous system. Then there's coherence, which is another aspect of the feminine, is coherence.
Mm.
So I have, I will, without a doubt, my work has brought me to writing this from watching people heal. It's really beautiful.
And where can people join you? How can people call you or get a session with you?
Oh, well, I have a website that is BernadetteChristi.com,
Okay.
and I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and people could reach out through my website.
Yeah. And your book, when will it be published?
I hope to have it published in the fall.
Okay.
Um, we'll see how quickly the feminine reveals the next part of it. And then I'm gonna actively work on getting it published, and hopefully it will be helpful to many people.
Mm. Thank you so much, Bernadette, for your insights. Thank you. Ooh.